Welcome, everyone. My name is Laura Burtness. I'm the College Career and Financial Aid Advisor at Hillsdale High School, and you are in the right place to learn about everything you needed to know about transferring from a two-year college to a four-year college. I will introduce our SMUHSD colleagues first. Evie, would you like to go ahead?
Thank you. Hi there. My name is Evie Hansen. I'm the College of Financial Aid Advisor over at San Mateo High School, and I will now send it over to my Aragon colleague.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mary O'Reilly, and I am the College and Career Advisor over at Aragon. So happy to see you all here tonight.
Let's have our esteemed CSM partners introduce themselves. Carol, hit it.
Thank you. My name is Carol Ullrich. I'm the Welcome Center Coordinator, and what I do is help first-time students come on in. So I will be seeing your students and you when you are ready to come to CSM. Thank you.
Sharon, how about you introduce yourself?
Wonderful. Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Sharon Quach. I am the transfer counselor here at CSM. I support students in creating their student education plan and making sure that they pick the right classes to match their program or degree goal.
And I guess I wind it up. I'm Mike Mitchell, the transfer program supervisor. I am Sharon's colleague, and I kind of help sort of like organize events, refer students to resources, along with Sharon, part of a transfer club. So to get you sort of basically resources to actually meet with the counselor. And also we set up appointments with different college reps once you're here on campus. So welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here.
Ready. So those of us in the San Mateo Union High School District, we are going to turn off our videos and our audios. Those of you in the audience who have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. If we can answer them, we are going to do it. And if not, we were going to wait to the end to answer all questions. Ready? Let's take it away, CSM. Welcome, everyone.
Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. All right. Can you all see this? Mike, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. And I'll kind of a prelude to what Sharon will go into the details of transferring. But what I want to say is that very basic that a lot of you may know is that when you start CSM, you're starting as a college freshman and you spend basically your first, we say two-year college, but some students could do 3 or more, but you're doing your 60 units, which is half of your bachelor's degree. You can do more units. You can say 3 years, but it's the lower division. And then you're able to transfer through a variety of ways. And resources. Of course, we always encourage you, this is why we have Carol here as well, and she'll be around if there's questions even at the end, is that when you're entering, every student applies. I know kind of the misnomer is, oh, I just need to see, I'm a transfer student, I'm not a regular student. No, everyone's a regular student. No matter where you go, not just our school, any of the community colleges, whatever, you're going to meet and go through your general ed. You're going to take your major prep. If you don't know your major, that's fine. We got great career resources. Again, we can offer you support areas with workshops that we have that can help you in that area. I'm going to just so that's kind of the overall basis. And then of course, any general counselor is also a transfer counselor. And then again, as you get closer to it and you kind of have an idea of maybe not exactly where you want to go, but like certain majors you have, that would be great. I'm going to show you just briefly, and you don't have to worry about this now, but just briefly our main site, and I'm not going to go through it, it's just there. It's an overview of transfer services. A lot of information. Our students access it. That we have. It's collegeofsanmateo.edu transfer. So again, I need to emphasize that once you apply, once you register, you go through orientation, maybe you've met with a counselor, okay? You can start, well, what supports do we have? So it goes all through the event calendar, even as welcome, kind of a transfer checklist. Sharon will kind of briefly touch about guaranteed transfer contracts, even our transfer club, how to get involved once you're a student here. University contact list. So I just want to point that out to you. And then again, if you have any questions about that or Welcome Center or especially Sharon, we will go ahead then and have her work with that. So at this point, I am going to stop sharing and I'll turn it over to Sharon.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike.
Sure.
This is just a quick overview and agenda of what we'll cover in today's presentation. So we're going to talk a little bit about transfer services and give an overview of the type of services that we offer to our students. And we'll briefly touch on some campus resources. There will be a lot out there, a lot of which will be covered in PEP This will just be a snapshot. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about CSM degrees and certificates, and also some transfer requirements, and also guaranteed transfer options for students who are transferring from the 2-year to the 4-year. And then we can leave some questions for the end. If you do have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we will address them at the tail end of the appointment. All right. Tail end of the presentation, not the appointment. So I wanted to kind of start off here, just talking about our learning communities and special programs. And on our campus, we have a lot of different learning communities that are tied to specific ethnic groups. So KTP, which is Katipunan, serves our Filipinx students, Mana, our Pacific Islander students, Puente, our Latinx students, and Umoja, our Black African American students. And students have an option to opt in if they want to participate in these learning communities. But the great thing about them is that the student gets to participate in a cohort with other students who are in these learning communities. And oftentimes the classes that they take are tied to counseling courses, which they will have designated counselors that meet with them to help them stay on track with transferring. And they take their English courses together, and they have culturally relevant literature that ties into those English classes. So a lot of students can relate a little bit more to reading the literature that pertains to their own culture. So that's a great way to build community with other students, but also find community on campus. There's different communities in addition. We have our honors project. So if you want to do some research, and this is a great way to help you stand out too in your UC applications, if you're writing about additional research that you conduct, you can join the honors project and conduct research and tie it to one of your courses. 9 in Action supports our student women athletes. So we have a bunch of resources for student athletes as well, and Project Change for our system impacted students as well. So a lot of different resources here on campus. Some of the main ones that many of our students tend to join as they transition from high school into CSM is the EOPS program, which stands for the Extended Opportunities Programs and Services. If you are a student receiving financial aid and you are full-time as a student, they offer specific counselors that meet with you 3 times a semester, provide you additional support with financial support with purchasing textbooks. And it's just a great way to build community with other students. You also will have priority registration, which is a huge bonus for many students. And you get a designated counselor that meets with you on a more frequent basis. So it is quite nice to have some of those advantages. The same thing goes for the Promise program. Students can be in both EOPS and Promise, or just one or the other, but you do need to be full-time as a student who's transitioning into CSM and maintain that for 2 to 3 years that you're here. And you get designated counselor support with your textbooks, also priority registration. So those are great programs to consider. And something that is unique to the learning communities and these special programs is that there are sometimes specific math classes and English classes that are reserved specifically for students in these programs. So when it comes time to register, you're not trying to compete to get into some of them. So those are just some great things about the programs and offerings that we have. And of course, we have Spark Point here on campus too that provides a lot of different support, which includes financial coaching, as well as our weekly food pantry for students who want to access groceries. This is all free for students who are here at CSM and are taking classes and enrolled on our campus. So we have also individuals who help with finding housing. So if an individual is who's currently transitioning into CSM and who needs support with that, we do have a coordinator that supports with all of those pieces. So these are just a few different support groups here on our campus. There's many more, but this is just a brief overview. Some of the benefits of transferring, one thing that is really big is one is you save a lot of money. So, for example, I was a community college student myself. I went to Skyline College, which is one of our sister campuses in our district. I spent 3 years before I ended up transferring, and I had three siblings. So there's four of us, and my parents were like, "How are we going to afford to pay for you to go to college?" And so one way that cut cost for like my family was to have us all go through community college. And fortunately now, but back then when I was a student, this didn't exist. But there is the Senate Bill 893, which provides free tuition if you are a resident of California and you currently live in San Mateo County. And so it is great because students are able to take classes for free if they meet the requirements for being eligible for that. And if not, there are other cost alternative options. So it is $46 a unit to take classes. But the great thing about transferring is you do save a lot of money. What you take here at CSM for your first 2 years is what freshmen and sophomores take at the 4 year, but just for a fraction of the price, if not for free, if you're a local resident. So those are just some things to kind of keep in mind. There's also higher acceptance rates when you are applying as a transfer student versus a student straight out of high school. Each of the campuses reserve a certain amount of spaces for transfer students, and they do like to accept transfer students because they know that they've gotten their general education for the most part, majority of them completed. And that means that students aren't having to be impacted at the school and trying to fight to get the classes. So the great thing is when you're transferring in, you're coming in typically as a junior standing and you're finishing off your last 2 years there. So if you think about it this way, at the community college, you're basically taking your freshman, sophomore year, which you would take at the 4 year. And then when you transfer, you're just finishing up typically within a 2 year time frame. If you go to school part-time, it might take a little bit longer. But generally speaking, there is a way for you to save money and also transfer to your school. So definitely things to consider there. The great thing too is you get to stay closer to home, and oftentimes students talk about how difficult the transition is going straight from high school into college. So community college is a nice middle ground that preps you and you kind of learn what it's like to be a college student, but also you get a transition in a more comfortable pace. So you kind of understand what it's like to be a college student and what the expectations are and adjusting to the workload and the units, which is very different from high school. So I think it's great to be able to transition through going through community college and then transferring. You also get to take your time to discover your interest. Sometimes at the 4 year, you have a certain period of time and you have to declare a major. If you don't declare a major, they kind of put you into a class where you have to decide. And if you can't decide, then your space is lost in that campus. So one thing to keep in mind is that at community college, you can take your time. Most students transfer within a 2 to 3 year time frame. But if you are working at the same time or you have other obligations like taking care of your family, there are students who also go to school part-time, and that is okay. And you could take your time to explore, take different classes. You don't have to feel the pressure to have to decide immediately and have to take all these classes. So it's a great way to figure out what you want to do, but also take your time in doing so. And the great thing too is the classroom sizes are really small and there's a close-knit community. As I mentioned, there's a lot of learning communities, a lot of programs here on campus that help students with their with transitioning into community college. So the great thing is you'll be in a classroom sometimes with 30 students. It could be a little bit more versus sometimes going to a lecture hall with 90 students plus. So it's definitely nice to have smaller classrooms and engagement in the classes. So these are just some of the benefits of transferring. If we take a look here, there's other schools that you can transfer to in different systems. So there's private schools, there's out-of-state schools. The most common ones that our students tend to transfer to are both the UCs and the CSUs. The UCs are the University of California schools, and the CSUs are the California state schools. There are 23 CSUs in California, and there are 10 UCs in California, but only 9 of them permit undergraduate students to go to. UCSF is the one reserved for graduate students. All that to say is that if we take a look here, like at CSM, you could see that some of the most popular UCs that our students transfer to, oh, sorry, this is state school. So some of the popular CSUs is SF State. We also have a lot of students transfer to East Bay and San Jose State. So those 3 are like the most popular CSUs that our students tend to transfer to. And when it comes to the UCs, we get a lot that transfer over to Davis, a few to Berkeley. I would say Santa Cruz and Santa Barbara and San Diego tend to be the other bigger schools that our students tend to transfer to. So all that to say is the UCs are really great if you're a student who's looking to participate in research and you love to do research, or someday you want to go into academia and teach or pursue a PhD. UCs are really catered to focusing and helping students learn research skills. And the CSUs are really big on hands-on learning. So a lot of their courses, especially if you're thinking about engineering, they will have associated labs with majority of their classes. And a lot of the CSUs have promote internships that might be more hands-on versus the UCs may have more internships geared towards research. So those are just things to think about, like what type of campus do you want to be on, and how will it aid you in your ultimate goals. And so as a student at Skyline, I transferred to UC Davis and I got my bachelor's degree over there in community development. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I ended up becoming a counselor. And I worked in a nonprofit for a while before I decided that I was going to go back to grad school. And when I applied for grad school, I went to San Jose State. So I'm a byproduct of both systems. I think they're both great, but they both serve different purposes. And the UCs are so good at research, and the CSUs really helped me find good internships. So, you know, depending on what you're looking for, the different campuses might offer you different options too. So I always encourage students to visit campuses, see what works for you, and also which schools may have specialties that focus on your major, or might have courses that really intrigue you that tie to your major. So that's always helpful to do some research there. One thing I also wanted to mention was just general requirements for UCs and CSUs. So for the CSUs and the UCs, you have to complete a minimum of 60 units. They have to be transferable units. Some classes are only UC transferable or only CSU transferable. Some are both. So it is very important that when you are selecting classes that you meet with a counselor to confirm that you have the correct amount of units. Sometimes some students take a bunch of classes, but they don't realize that they're all CSU transferable and they're trying to transfer to UC. So they're short UC units. So it's very important that you make sure that you understand the classes that you're taking will help you transfer to whichever institution that you're trying to transfer to. Very important to check in with the counselor about that. You also want to increase your chances as much as possible of getting admitted. So that means completing as much of the major course work prep that is on Assist. Assist is a website that's free for students to use and counselors, where you're able to look up, depending on what community college you go to, you can input that community college and where you want to transfer to. So for example, you can put Berkeley and you would put CSM and it'll tell you, okay, I'm an econ major. So you'll select the major and it'll tell you what classes you would need in order to increase your chances of being admitted, to prepare yourself for that major once you transfer. Sometimes there are very specific requirements. So if you don't meet those, you wouldn't be able to transfer. And sometimes there's just recommended courses. But the important thing is understanding what you need to do in order to make sure that you increase your chances as much as possible to be able to transfer to the schools that you would like. So if you're picking multiple campuses, you do have to look at what are the requirements across the multiple campuses, especially if you're going to be applying for several UCs and CSUs, since there's slight differences in terms of what they require. So taking the major prep coursework is important. With the CSUs, they do have a lower GPA requirement, generally speaking, at least a 2.0 minimum. And that's just the minimum. It doesn't necessarily guarantee you a spot into the school, because just remember that in order to be competitive as a transfer student too, you got to make sure that you still try your hardest and earn the highest grades that you can. So I always tell students to try their best, but at a minimum, you do need a 2.0. And for the CSUs, there's something called the Golden Four, which pretty much include the two writing courses that you would need: a written communication and a critical thinking. And you need an oral communications class as well as a math class. So in order to transfer to any CSU, if you do not have those Golden Four, you cannot transfer. And you have to have a C or higher in those 4 classes. So it's very essential that you make sure you complete those before you decide to apply to transfer. So just really making sure that by the end of the spring before you transfer, you have all 4 of those completed with a C or higher. For the UCs, as I mentioned, very similar. You need the 60 units. You should also be looking at the major prep coursework that you need. But with the UCs, they tend to be a little bit more rigorous in terms of the GPA requirement. So their minimum is usually a 2.4 GPA. And if you're a non-resident, then it would be a 2.8. And again, this is the minimum. It doesn't necessarily mean that you would get into a competitive UC if you have this GPA. So traditionally, a lot of students who get into Berkeley typically have like a 3.5 or higher. And then some of the other UCs around a 3.0 always makes you a little bit more competitive. So I always encourage students, try your best to get the best grades that you can, because it will increase your chances of getting into campuses. But all that to say, minimum 2.0 for CSUs, 2.4 minimum for UCs. The private schools, they vary, and out-of-state schools too. But if you are interested, you can always make a counseling appointment, and that counselor can go through the requirements for any specific schools that are not part of the UC or the CSU system. You also want to make sure that you complete required coursework with specific minimum grades. So on Assist, which is the website that I was referring to earlier that tells you the major course, some of them will indicate a minimum grade that you need within those classes for that specific major. So making sure that you complete those is very essential. And there are some students who want to transfer out as quick as possible. So for some of those students, they may not be working towards getting an associate's degree. They just want to do the bare minimum, which is hit the 60 units and do the 7-course pattern. And the 7-course pattern basically includes 2 English courses, 1 math class, and at least 4 classes from either the arts and humanities, the social and behavioral science, or the physical and biological sciences. So there are a lot of STEM majors who apply, and it's really difficult for them to complete all of their GEs in every category and also the major prep. So we recommend prioritize your major prep that's on Assist, and then do the 7-course pattern so that you can hit your 60, and then you can transfer and finish the rest of your GEs at the 4-year. So there is that option too. If you're trying to transfer out quicker, you have an option to do that, or you could fulfill your full general education. And it used to be IGETC, but now it's going to be transitioning to the Cal GETC. So there's specific GE requirements, but your counselor will go through what that will entail. So when you transition in and you meet with them, they'll explain what are the different courses that fall under the different categories and what would be most suitable for you to meet your specific transfer goals. If you're trying to get out sooner, or if you want to pick up an associate's degree along the way, you could do that too. And I'll share a little bit more about what that entails in the upcoming slides. One thing that has been relatively new is the California state schools, which there's 23 in California, have the transfer success pathways. And this is a pretty new program that was established about a year ago, and students now can do guaranteed transfer into specific CSUs. But just so you know, there is a very specific time period in which that you can participate in that. So for some students, when they are going in and they're trying to opt in for a specific school that they want to participate for the transfer success pathways, the only way they could do it is if they create a CSU transfer planner. We will send links to all of this at the tail end, so you don't have to worry. But when you create an account, there's only the month of September that you can opt in to participate for TSP, which is the transfer success pathways. Not all campuses accept TSP for all majors. So the only way that you can really go in to opt in is in the month of September. So you have to go into the CSU planner, create an account, and look up the specific schools that you're interested in and which programs by alphabetical order. They'll tell you if they accept the transfer success pathways. Right now it says no because it's not the season to enroll in TSP, so it's naturally going to say no. But when September comes around, you'll be able to see which campuses provide which majors for this transfer success pathways. And basically, if you plan to transfer out in 2 to 3 years, you are able to opt in. If you meet the requirements, hit the 60 units and meet the minimum GPA, you're guaranteed into that specific CSU with that major. But you have to opt in for it in the month of September. And in order to have it be valid, you have to have all of your requirements done within a 2 to 3 year time period. So it's very similar to TAG, which is the transfer admission guarantee for UCs, but this is separate for the CSUs. So I always encourage students to take the time that they want to look into the schools that they're interested in and to check to see if the majors are being offered for that. There is a brochure that goes through kind of the details of that. So I'll put it here in the chat if you all want to share that with the group. But this is what it entails. And if you have any specific questions or you need support with selecting a school, you can make a counseling appointment with me or any other general counselor, and they should be able to support you in navigating that process. The other piece I was going to talk about today was the UC tag. So for the University of California, there is the transfer admission guarantee option. Basically, if you are a student who is in a California community college and or you're an international student, you can participate in a guaranteed transfer option. You have an option to choose one of 6 schools. And so there are specific requirements that need to be met if you want to participate in TAG. First, the only way you can submit a TAG application is creating a UC TAP account. So I encourage students, no matter where they are in their transfer journey, whether a freshman or a sophomore, you want to create a UC TAP account because you can actually update it every semester and you can start as a freshman. You can input the classes you're taking and the grades that you have, and it calculates and tells you how close you are to meeting your 30 units minimum that you need in order to submit your tag. And then your 60 total that you need by the end of the time that you leave your community college. So it's a great way to see, do you meet the GPA requirement? And also, do you have all the courses and the requirements needed in order to participate in TAG? You are only able to select one UC to tag to, and there's only one filing period that you can submit your tag, which is September 1st to September 30th. So unfortunately, if you miss that tag period, you will not be able to submit a tag application. And in order to submit one, you have to have 30 units by the end of the summer prior to submitting your tag application. And you can only submit a tag application typically after it's during your first semester of your sophomore year. So many students get confused because they think, oh, should I be submitting my tag application as a freshman, or in my first semester or second semester? Generally speaking, it is going to be in your first semester of your sophomore year, after you've hit 30 units. So you could talk to a counselor about setting yourself up to be able to be eligible for tag, but you're not necessarily filling out the application until your second year. Once you have 30 units and you've looked at the major prep, you've done as much of those as possible, and you hit 60 units by the end of the springtime. So if you have any questions, you can always make an appointment with the counselor and they can go through the specific requirements for each of the schools, because they are different depending on which school you want to tag to. The benefits of the tag is that they review your academic records earlier. UC Merced and UC Davis are the two that typically get back to students sooner. And sometimes students will apply in September and they'll hear back by January. Some of the other schools, though, typically they will take a little bit longer to review, but there still is benefits of tagging, because you do have that guarantee cushion that you will get admitted to school as long as you meet the GPA requirements that are needed and you are able to hit those units. So you get notified earlier when you participate in tag, and you get informed of specific guidance about your major prep and also general education coursework. So there's a lot of benefits of participating in tag. And you are selecting basically one of these 6 campuses. These are the only 6 that provide tag options. So UC Berkeley, UC LA, and UC San Diego are excluded from the tag option. And one thing to really note too is, depending on what the major is of the student, it could either be a participating tag or non-participating tag. So there are specific schools that don't allow tagging for computer science and also for engineering majors, because those are all really merit-based. So you have to take the major prep, you have to meet a certain GPA. And they just evaluate because it's so competitive at their school. So they look holistically at the student's application. But all that to say is that there is a matrix, a tag matrix, and I like to refer to this for students, and I'll also put it here in the chat. But they change these requirements every year. So just keep that in mind, that you want to make sure you check in with the counselor, because there are changes. And you could see that of the 6 campuses here, they'll tell you which majors are excluded that they don't allow students to tag to. So although you may be a UC Davis student and you can tag as an econ major, you can't tag as a computer science major or a data science or landscape architecture. So there's very specific majors that are excluded. So very important to keep in mind that depending on where you want to transfer to, you do want to make sure that if that is your major, that you try to increase your chances as much as possible to apply regularly. So you don't have to tag to the school. But if it just so happens that your major isn't excluded, then you may want to consider that. So the 2 schools that tend to have the higher GPA threshold for tagging is UC Irvine and UC Santa Barbara, which both is a 3.4. So that means at the time that you apply for and you submit your tag application until the time that you leave, so that year after, you have to maintain that 3.4, and you have to have that 3.4 during that time that you apply and maintain it throughout to be eligible for the tag to be accepted. If something falters through, then some tags can get denied. So one, you have to meet the GPA specifically for the campus, and also perhaps for that specific department if your major falls into it. So those are things that you want to make sure to keep in mind, because like with Davis engineering, you have to have a 3.5. With letters and science, so that would be a psychology, sociology, you need a 3.2. So every school has slight differences in GPA requirements, and they all are a little bit different per major. So when in doubt, just speak to a counselor to make sure that you meet those eligibility requirements. And this is a grid for the 25-26 academic year, so you could take a look at it. There's a whole guide on that. So just keeping in mind that these are some of the eligibility requirements for TAG. We always try to encourage students to check in with a counselor. It's good practice to make a counseling appointment at least once, if not twice every semester, just to make sure you're on track with taking the right courses and that you know that you're meeting your minimum units that you need to transfer out in the time frame that you're looking to do so. So check to see if you're on track with your units, that you took all your major prep, that you meet the GPA that you need in order to tag or to submit your TSP for the CSUs. So those are very important. And what you want to do is make sure that you meet with a counselor to be able to verify that leading up to applying to transfer. If for whatever reason there are very technical questions that are specific to particular schools and departments, you could also contact the university counselor or the rep from that school, and sometimes they can offer and extend their support with clarifying any questions that students might have about specific courses. And so that's an additional resource. And again, I always encourage students to get very familiar with the website Assist because it is free for students, parents, counselors. Anybody can access this website where you can look at what are the major prep courses that you need in order to increase your chances of transferring to the UCs and CSUs. And they just added a couple private schools too, and they're building it out a little bit more for other private schools local to the area as well. So it's expanding, but these are all really important tips to make sure that you're on track with transferring. I think those are the main pieces. We have like a transfer toolkit where I link students to the UC TAP, information about the tag, the CSU transfer planner, all of that. And so this presentation will be made available to you all to click in. Everything is hyperlinked for you all to access. So at the tail end, please feel free to take a look at all of that. But this is our team here. So I just want to thank Mike and Carol, Stella and Liliana, who are in the other room supporting too with the presentation. But those are the main pieces. And then Carol, did you want to touch base on PEP and the orientation dates?
Sure. Thanks, Sharon. So we have some upcoming PEP orientation dates at the school. So Mills, Cappuccino, Aragon, Burlingame, San Mateo. We actually come to the schools. We do orientation. We make sure that everything's checked off, that they are assessed, and that they apply to promise and do all these things. I have other people from EOPS that come and speak as well. And then the last thing they do is they're signing up for a group counseling session. Once they do that, they've met the matriculation steps and will be issued a registration date and will get priority for attending the PEP date, the PEP event. Just so you know, there's that first counseling appointment where the student will let the counselors know what major, if they have an idea of what they want to study, and they will give them a student educational plan for the first semester. Then after school ends, if they want to come and come up here, we are open during the summer as well. They can sit down with a counselor after they've registered. They're going to be registering for school if they don't go through PEP. They'll be registering May 6th for fall. So it's great to go through this because you do get a better priority date. And then in the summer, if they want to see a counselor again, they can. But the initial appointment is really to get them to know what they need to register for, and the counselor can help them out with that. So thank you. And so these are the dates, and the students are notified, I think, from their counselors about the events.
Thank you, Carol. You know, there was one slide that I realized I passed earlier. I just wanted to make a very quick note about it. Is that at CSM, we have different degree options. So if you are a student who's looking to transfer and you're picking a program of study here that matches the major that you're going to pick once you transfer to the CSU, you can opt in to get an associate's degree for transfer. And basically, the courses align with helping students transfer to the 4-year. And the ADT increases the student's chance of getting admitted to at least one local CSU, whereas the TSP, you're specifically picking which CSU by opting in for it. But the ADT, you can, for example, let's say you're studying psychology and you want to transfer to SF State. And so you get the Psychology Associates of Arts for transfer. You're basically taking the classes that you need to transfer to San Francisco State, including the GEs and the major prep. And a lot of those classes align with the 2-year degree that you can walk away with here at CSM before you transfer. So the associate's degrees are 2-year degrees that you can get prior to transferring. They're not needed in order for you to be able to transfer, but some students pick them up along the way because they're already working towards 60 units, which is a requirement to get the associate's degree. And they're taking the GEs and major prep, which typically align with what's listed on Assist. So all that to say is that we do have different programs depending on your interests. We also have other Associates of Arts and Associates of Science degrees, as well as certificate options. So depending on what you're interested in, you can explore different options. And they are all listed here. And we have 22 different associate's degree for transfer, and also some other degrees that are listed. But that's pretty much all that I wanted to cover on my end. I'll put it for the group in the chat. Is there anything else that you all wanted to cover?
Thank you so much, Sharon. We have a few questions in the chat.
Yeah.
If anybody doesn't mind, some of these, I figure other people might be interested in, so we'll
Sure.
bring some of these up. If a student is going to be going to Kenyatta or Skyline, how does the transfer process differ, if at all?
They don't differ too much. You still need the 60 units. You still want to take the major prep for your specific major. But what I will say is there are specific campuses that have specialty programs. For example, Kenyatta College has early childhood education and child development, and Skyline has early childhood education. So if you're a student who wants to get an associate's degree, CSM doesn't offer that. We don't offer associate's degree for transfer in that. So some students, what they'll do is they'll change their home campus based on what specialty programs are offered at those campuses. So you may want to look into that because there's different campuses offer different types of programs. But all that to say is the requirements are generally the same. You do need to take your major prep. You do also need to hit your 60 units. The same would go for tagging, 30 units by the end of summer and all of that. So you can take classes across all of our campuses. But one thing to keep in mind is just making sure that if you're applying for a specific school, for example, like UC Davis, and even some of the majors in Berkeley now require that certain classes be taken in a sequence. So, for example, they want you to take Calc 1 and Calc 2 at one campus. So even though you take Calc 3 later at Kenyatta, they want you to take Calc 1 and 2 at CSM if you start at Calc 1 here. So it's very important that you check in with a counselor because you just want to make sure that you're following the requirements that are needed. But generally speaking, they are the same across, and it is important to keep in mind what are the requirements needed to transfer to specific schools.
Thank you. Also, so what else are UCs looking for besides a higher GPA? Is it mostly just GPA and you just hit those classes and it's a guaranteed transfer to those 6?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the UCs look holistically at your application. So they will be looking at what extracurricular activities have you engaged in, any clubs, volunteering, also working. So if you have any work experience, you can include that in your application. You also need to submit what's called a personal insight question. Um, and what you're basically doing is you're answering four of the questions that are listed. And there's one specific one that you have to answer as a transfer student. And so I'll put this here in the chat, but generally speaking, these don't change too frequently. So students can kind of get a head start, and they are very similar to the personal insight questions you have to do straight out of high school. There's slight differences, but for the most part, they're very similar. So you have to answer four of these questions. So they evaluate your personal insight questions. And then they look at your extracurriculars and also your GPA. So they do kind of evaluate holistically that way. So if you do internships and you engage in other extracurriculars, it does make you a stronger candidate as a whole. And Mike, am I missing anything else in addition to those? Oh, I think you're muted.
Sorry, I was muted. A lot of those questions usually come up in the chat. So generically, Sharon's right. GPA is always important for the UCs. They do look at activities. The personal insight questions complement it. Some schools like Berkeley and LA and San Diego will put more emphasis on it. They now do spot checking. I don't know if they do it with freshmen, but they now really try to make sure it's legit, no plagiarizing, make sure it's in your own words, not AI specifically, because they can sort of pick that up. They have become more strict on that. But and then to kind of answer a follow-up, because a lot of people, I don't know if I answered all, were asking, well, what are my chances if I do this? What's easier to get into? Like say if it's computer science, it all depends on the school. It all depends on how many students are applying, what the GPA is for that year. Do they have a tag on the CSU level? Do you have an associate degree of transfer? That could help. It's not everything. And then again, with UCs, the personal statement. So yes, when you attend CSM, you do have an opportunity to transfer possibly to several schools. It may not be the first school of your choice is a way to sum it up, but you will have that opportunity. This is your best advantage as a community college student outside of entering college as a freshman at a four-year school, if all that makes sense.
Yeah, those are all good points.
So wait a minute.
Oh, go ahead.
So does guaranteed transfer mean guaranteed?
The tag does, yes.
Yes. Okay. So audience members, it's a guarantee, but you still have to fill out the complete application, including the PIQs, including, we're just talking UCs here for a minute, including the PIQs, including the whole application.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, one quick thing.
Yeah.
When you submit the tag, the PIQs is not necessary for that. But when you apply regularly, which all students should still be applying regularly for the school that they tag to, that's when you submit your PIQs. So from October 1st to December 2nd, that's when the PIQs get submitted with the rest of the schools that you're selecting. And then when you are tagging, you're only picking that one school and you're basically creating your UC TAP account. And that's just basically all of your courses that you've taken and the grades that you got. So that's how they evaluate the tag. They're not asking for the extracurriculars and the essay until the application opens up. I just wanted to clarify that part.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Can you talk a little bit? Somebody asked about AP credits. If a student gets a 3, 4, or 5 on an AP class in high school, and they go to CSM, Skyline or Kenyatta, how does that impact them? Do they get to skip a class and go on to the next higher one? Does that count for the 60 units? How does that work generally?
Yeah, so if you do have AP credits, it can count towards your 60 units. But one thing to be very, very mindful of is every school has a different AP chart. And so UC Berkeley may be very different from UC Irvine. And just because you got a 3, you might get credit at one school, but for like, let's say Irvine says that you need a 3 in calculus to bypass and get credit for the first calc, but UC Berkeley says you need a 4 or 5. So in that case, you might want to just retake that because you don't want to risk the chance of not being eligible for the school. So it's very important. There's AP charts tied to the different campuses, and you'll be able to see what the minimum score is, but also making sure that you submit your AP score report into CSM. So when you're a student who's taken a couple AP classes, go on College Board, pay the $15, get your AP scores into our system. That way we can evaluate to see if one, we can get you units for it, or if it can meet one of the GE areas. And then 2, can you bypass classes because it meets one of the credit areas? So it's really important to get those in, and you need to have the official score report for the AP scores in order for us to evaluate that. But in terms of transferring, yes, every school has a different standard in terms of what they require for the AP scores, so it would vary, and it's important to just meet with the counselor to review what that would look like before you decide what class you want to take, especially if you're a STEM student, because there are some schools that prefer for you to take the Calc 1 and Calc 2 specifically at a community college and continue on. So those are things to just keep in mind.
That's good.
And
And as Sharon was
just wanna
speaking,
add
made me
one more
realize
thing.
that
I'm
when
sorry,
you're
Meg.
applying, oh, go ahead.
Hold on, about the AP score report. I think if your student is taking it now in May or whenever the AP tests are, if they bubble CSM, they will send an official one to CSM. And I think, and Laura, you can answer if they still have the bubble ability when they're taking the APs. It may give you an opportunity to send it to CSM without having to pay the $15 because they'll send one to the schools of your choice. So just have your students look at the tests that they're taking this year. And if they didn't take any tests this year, then definitely have to go into College Board and have it sent to CSM.
Thanks,
I do
Carol.
want to mention a slightly different topic, although Sharon alluded to it, because we got a lot of questions here, and I'm sure the high schools do as well. I'm in middle college. Maybe I'm eligible to get a degree because I've taken a lot of classes, dual enrollment at CSM, Counter, Skyline. But please note this. In order to apply as a transfer student, you need to be at CSM or Kenyatta Skyline. So you may have done all these courses. You would put all those in when you apply as a transfer. You can certainly do your high school application. And then what they'll determine is where you start. It may be transfer. You could end up as a sophomore if you apply. But when you're applying as a freshman, you cannot put transfer student because it's going to ask you, because they'll go by your graduation date. And when you go to the UC website, it will clearly state, or if you talk to a rep, because these questions come up a lot, it'll clearly state that if you're a high school senior, and again, they'll count those courses, you still have to apply as a freshman. And the same with the tag. You say, well, I've taken all these courses in high school. That's great. Come here to CSM. It's going to be your same student ID number. You're going to apply. You're going to go through the orientation, as Carol has mentioned, at a lot of schools. But it's for community college transfer, even though you've taken those courses out of high school. So I just want to make that clear that when you do apply after a senior, you're applying as a freshman, and then the college will determine, are you a freshman or you're a high freshman, sophomore? But basically tags and all of the other stuff is from CSM. So a lot of those questions came up in some form or another, so I did want to address that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
At what point do students see you, Sharon, second semester, sophomore year? They keep, how do they manage their time with seeing counselors?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one, if you're in a learning community, you're kind of mandated to meet with your counselor 3 times a semester, and it really does help to have that somebody checking in with you to make sure that you're on track with your degree goal. But on top of that, I just encourage students at a minimum, try to meet with the counselor once every semester. You could come to the general counseling office or call us to book an appointment. If you are just planning for transfer and you're in your very first semester, I still recommend once every semester at a minimum. And it is helpful to also book the appointment once you see the catalog go up too, because that way you could start planning for the next semester. So I always encourage students, that's a great time if you want to check in once in the beginning and once around the time the catalog is released for the following semester. It's a great way to double check and make sure that you're taking all the right classes. If you're a freshman who just wants to get a head start, I would say you could join our transfer club. We offer bi-monthly workshops that help students on how to create their UC TAP account, how to fill out their CSU transfer planner. We have reps from Berkeley who will come and talk about admissions criterias and how to make yourself stand out as a student who's applying. So we have a lot of resources for students who are still in their first year who want to plan to transfer. And then if you are in your second year and you are in the process of transferring, these workshops are still beneficial for you, and they happen on Mondays, every other Mondays from 12:30 to 1:30. So we encourage students to attend the workshops. And also take advantage of like the knowledge that they learn from the university reps and in these workshops to apply them to individual times that they are working on their application. But all that to say is we have amazing counselors here at CSM. My focus is in transfer, but all the general counselors are trained to support students with transfer related questions. So you will be in good hands with whoever that you end up meeting with. And we are all here to support you as a student in your transfer journey. So yeah, we have great counselors here.
That is a fantastic way to
And
end.
just one more thing, Laura,
Yeah.
about that. Mike and Sharon go into classes. So even if the student, there's so many opportunities where they go in and the professors allow them to come in and speak to the students. So they're not just, it's on the student to come in and make an appointment. They're going to be seeing these things happening through the semesters that reminds them, and they'll say, come in and see a counselor. Make sure you see a counselor. And so just because Sharon and Mike are here telling you about this, they're active out in the college, seeing the students all the time. So it's not necessarily at the end, because they're going to have these opportunities with these workshops and in the classes.
Righty. And there it is. It is 7:30. Thank you all so much for being here. Our CSM partners, we're very thankful for your support. Thank you to all of our audience members, and please reach out to your college career and financial aid advisors if you have any questions. Thank you, everyone. Good night.